Rob Dauster, National Men's Basketball, College Basketball Analyst with us on 365 Sports, the Field of 68. Just want to start with this, with Big 12, with Houston and what Kelvin Sampson's done. This is not like this is new. I mean, this guy's won everywhere he's been, but to go into the Big 12, Rob, which was such a dominant conference, and do what he's done, just your thoughts about the accomplishment of the Cougars.
He's been incredible, man. I don't think you can overstate the job that Kelvin Sampson has done at Houston. And I don't think people realize how good they are this year. Ever since Milos Uzan took the step forward, there was a point in time early in the season when he was still trying to figure out how can you, as a point guard, step into a role with a program that already has the culture that someone like Houston does. It already has the continuity, the pieces in place, the leadership already in within the locker room. I think he struggled a little bit finding a way to be able to step in there and be himself. And it took him a while to realize, like, hey, you know what? Sometimes the best thing for Houston basketball is for me to be a little bit selfish, which is a weird way for point guards to think. But once he got over that mental hurdle, he has been unbelievable and unstoppable. In the last 12 games, he's averaging 14 points and 4 assists. He's been playing at an All-American level in the last 6 weeks. And to me, Houston is closer to being in that Auburn Duke tier than they are to everybody else that is kind of near the top and fighting for a 1 seed. I think Houston has a very, it's going to be hard for me not to have Auburn, Houston, and Duke in the Final Four when I fill out my bracket on Selection Sunday.
How many teams do you think entering the tournament? There's 300 and whatever amount of Division I teams, and of course all of 68 make it. But how many teams, barring somebody just getting on an insanity roll that you don't expect, do you think can win a national title this year?
I think it's probably about 8 would be what I think. Duke, Auburn, Houston, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama. I would have Texas Tech in that mix, and I do think at this point I'm getting close to the idea that Michigan State is a team that's going to be able to make a little bit of noise here in the tournament. But Smokey, I will say this. If you gave me Duke, Auburn, and Houston, I might take those 3 against the field at this point. I really do. We thought all season last year that we were headed towards an inevitable collision course that featured Purdue and UConn in the national championship game. And I feel like that's kind of where we're heading with Duke and Auburn at this point. You got an unstoppable force on one side, you got an immovable object on the other side, and at some point they're just going to collide. And honestly, in San Antonio, I would not be complaining about a national championship game between those two programs.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Auburn, how would you describe? And I remember they played Baylor recently. Alabama's played Baylor recently. They, of course, Alabama, Auburn rivals, same conference. How do you describe playing against them? Against Houston, to me, it's like you're walking into a dog pound. And that sometimes we look at that and we forget there's a lot of talent. They got some great players. But how would you describe having to play Auburn?
I think you got to do a lot of prayer beforehand. I think you have to make sure that you shoot about as well as you possibly can. They at this point are. I just don't know how you beat them, right? This is what I've kind of come down to, and I've talked with some coaches about this. This is how crazy it is. Right now, according to the sports books, Janai Broome is the heavy favorite to be the National Player of the Year this season, right? And I think the best way for you to have a chance to be able to beat Auburn is to take everybody else away. Take away Tahad Pettiford, take away Chaney Johnson, take away Chad Baker-Mazara, take away Miles Kelly, sell out on those guys, and do everything you can to have Auburn run their offense through their National Player of the Year in the post. I think the most inefficient thing that Auburn does offensively is throw the ball into Janai Broome in the post, because they're just good, as opposed to being unbelievable, elite, unstoppable, whatever. They are just good when they throw the ball into to Janai Broome in the post. That's where I'm at with Auburn. The best way to beat them is to let the National Player of the Year touch the ball every single time down the floor. And I think that about sums up what it's like having to play that team.
What and how did the SEC go from what was – that doesn't mean they didn't have good teams and teams that could play for a national title, but they're now really deep. I mean, like, okay, yeah, Everyone's getting. They're paying people.
It's not just the money that the school is making. There's been a directive to invest resources from the conference into basketball, and it's paying for Nate Oates as a coach at Alabama, where he's getting like $4.5 million a year. It is paying Bruce Pearl enough that he can go to Auburn, win all these games, and not want to leave. It's about making sure that you get coaching talent like Rick Barnes after he left Texas, about making sure that someone like Florida is going to go spend the money they got to spend to be able to get a guy like Todd Golden there. And you pay for the coaches, you get the talent in the program, and then beyond that, I think the thing that's underrated about the SEC is, I live up here in New Jersey, right? And around here, I live outside Philly. It's Eagles, it's Phillies, it's Sixers, it is Flyers. Like, you root for the team from the city, the professional team. But in the South, in Mississippi, if you're from Oxford, like, you're rooting for Ole Miss football, then you're rooting for Ole Miss basketball, then you're rooting for Ole Miss baseball. And you love everything Ole Miss. You love everything about that university. And if you could find a way to make those basketball programs that aren't necessarily the best programs in the sport, but are part of a university that this entire region will get behind, I think that people are realizing if you have some success, then you're going to have non-traditional basketball powers have home courts that make them elite. Like, Auburn has no basketball history, and they have the absolute best home court right now in the SEC, right? Tennessee is a football school, and on Saturday afternoon against Alabama, they had 23,000 people in that building. It's, if you can find a way to get those fans that love the school passionate about the basketball program because they are winning, then you're going to find a way to be able to make yourself a very, very, very good team. So it starts with the investment, it starts in the coaching, and then wins turn into this home court, which just creates this avalanche where we reach the point where the best money, the best fans, and the most profitable places to be a basketball program reside in the SEC right now.
Was it Auburn hiring Bruce Pearl that kickstarted everybody else then going out to find their coach? I mean, Rick Barnes, Tennessee had been around, but was that the linchpin or that triggered everything else?
I mean, it kind of happened at the same time that right. It was right around the same time that Rick Barnes went to Tennessee. A couple years later, Alabama went and hired Nate Oates. Right around that same time, South Carolina hired Frank Martin, and he took them to a Final Four. So it was around 2014, 2015 when the SEC made, like, the commissioner was told the schools, you got to invest in this. You got to make an effort to be good at basketball, because there was a point in time when it was kind of a joke, right? Like, how are these SEC programs not better? You have all of this talent, you have all of this athleticism within the I guess the confines of where the SEC land is. And why aren't they better? Well, it's because all these other programs are willing to invest in it. Like, why would you go play at Ole Miss if they don't care about it? You're not going to have fans showing up. The coaches aren't there to kind of make you want to be better, right? But now that these places are investing in the coaching and in the travel and in trying to be good at this sport, it's now become the marquee place to go play college basketball.
Then you have Chris Beard, who gets fired at Texas, goes to Ole Miss. That you mentioned. Texas Tech, I saw your note. If they're healthy, and you talk about a bunch of rabid dogs, because those two, Houston and Tech, I mean, my goodness, the strong survive, and they split on each other's court. But what Grant McCasland has done, who he has, Toppin, winning in Houston when Toppin was ejected, and then, of course, so was McCasland. Your thoughts about Houston and Tech? Can either one of them, both of them, be a Final Four team?
Tech for sure. Yeah. I think Houston, we talked about them. Like, I think Houston I'd be very surprised if they're not in the Final Four. But Tech, when they get going offensively, I think that they are a credit to the ability of a coach to be able to identify the pieces that are going to fit in the way that he wants to play. JT Toppin was a huge name that came out of the portal, right? But he wasn't the kind of obvious surefire home run that they were bringing in. He's 6'9", 220 going into the Big 12, where if you're a 5 at 6'9", 220, like, you're pretty significantly undersized in that conference. And So he comes in, he gets a whole bunch of money. Like the reports were at 7 figures, 2 commas. And I think that bringing him in when he maybe had, it wasn't like Hunter Dickinson, it wasn't like Coleman Hall. There was some other bigger names out there, but they were able to get him to come in and fit him with a point guard that flew under the radar, and Elijah Hawkins, who's this great facilitator. And then you have a whole bunch of shooters around him, and whether it's Kerwin Walton or Trance McMillan or Christian Anderson, who's been really impressive. I think Darian Williams, in the role that he kind of plays as the connector of it all, it all fits. It all makes sense. It's all guys that are going to be able to do exactly what Grant McCasland wants those guys to do. And that's half the battle when it comes to transfers. It's not just the biggest name, the biggest budget. Anybody can spend money. Doesn't mean you're spending money well. And I don't know if anybody spent money better than Texas Tech did this offseason in the portal. They've done an incredible job of talent identification.
Rob Dauster Field of 68 with us. UConn, North Carolina, Kansas, Baylor, and I'm forgetting somebody else, all ranked in the top 10, and then all out of the top 25, the preseason top 10. Scott, did he misjudge his roster? Josh being hurt inside obviously hurt them. Roach has been hit and miss, had a huge game against Oklahoma State. They needed. What happened, you think, with Baylor?
I mean, I think a lot of it is one, they just haven't been able to consistently be healthy and have like all their 7 best guys available, right? Jeremy Roach has been in and out of the lineup. Josh has been in and out of the lineup. Langston Love's been in and out of the lineup. Jalen's missed some time. VJ's missed some time. I think part of it is just it's hard to build a level of continuity and get these guys to come together when they're not really together all that often, right? I think part of it is when you bring in Norchad Omier, you're banking on the ability to be absolutely elite offensively, because he does have some limitations on the defensive end of the floor. Doesn't mean you can't win. Miami went to the Final Four with him as their 5-man, but they were also a sub 100 team in defensive efficiency with him as their 5-man. And they made it that far because they had 3 guards that were absolute killers, including Isaiah Wong, who was an All-American kind of a guy. And as good as Jeremy Roach is and has been, he hasn't been All-American level. And Robert Wright and VJ Edgecombe have both been really good in flashes, but they're freshmen, which means there's flashes where they look like freshmen. And I think that's just kind of it's not necessarily talent identification as much as you're relying on freshmen in roles that are maybe a little bit too big for what you would want out of a freshman. And you haven't been quite good enough offensively to make up for some of the limitations that you have on the defensive end of the floor with your guy. I mean, look, Norchad Omier is a 17-10 guy. Like he is one of the best low post producers in college basketball, and you can win with him there, but you have to be able to be elite offensively. And I think because of the issues with injuries and the issues with having freshmen be freshmen, it's been difficult for Baylor to reach that level on that end of the floor.
Did you see the Bill Self statement he released over the weekend? What were your I know they also had the drama and unfortunately the social media backlash to Mayo, his player after the loss to Tech, who's good. What was that about?
I think it was just as simple as Kansas fans have never experienced being mediocre before, and that a lot of that fallout is coming down on his guys. But I also think part of the problem is that he has a roster of guys that are really, really feeling the angst from the fan base. And he is trying to step in front of, all these fans are lobbing grenades at the players, and Bill Self is trying to step in front of it to take the brunt of that because he knows that these guys can't really handle it. You can see it with Zeke Mayo. It is all up here right now. They are making mistakes in crunch times of games that you would not expect high school teams to be making in crunch time of games. And I think that a lot of it is confidence. A lot of it is dealing with the mental space and the pressure that comes with being a Kansas basketball team and dealing with the struggles. And I don't think that this team is built for the level of criticism and the level of media coverage that comes with being a Kansas basketball team right now. And I think he's just trying to get in the way of that to help alleviate some of the stress on the guys that are actually out there playing the game.
Couple more questions, Rob, if you don't mind. We knew about football with Oklahoma, Texas moving into the SEC, and Texas flashed they're where they are, and they hit that it peaked at just the right time to enter the conference. In basketball, Rodney Terry, they have a win against Kentucky, and then they'll get blown out by Georgia or South Carolina. What about the transition for Oklahoma and UT in the SEC? Has it gone worse than you thought or about what you thought? And, of course, the conference is 10, 12, 13 teams deep.
It's been about par for the course. I think that in an ideal world, Texas probably should be better than what they are. But given the way that this roster was built and some of the issues that Rodney Terry has as a coach, I don't think it's all that surprising that they struggled a little bit and the bottom kind of fell out of this thing. But Texas will be back. Texas will make if they end up making a change, I think they're going to get this hire right, and I expect Texas to end up being back. Oklahoma, like this is kind of what they do. They're the opposite of what Arkansas is, right? They look great all the time in the non-conference, and then you get to January, February, and April, and the bottom falls out. They feel like they've done that like the last 3 seasons, whereas Arkansas under Muss typically would be horrible through January and then find a way to turn it on and end up making a run to like the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16. So I'm not that surprised with what's happening with Oklahoma. I think Texas will be better moving forward. This is just kind of a fluky year, I think.
All right, in the Big 12, a lot of BYU's having a nice run like they did in football at the end but anyone on the hot seat, in your opinion, in the Big 12?
I think maybe just Bobby Hurley. I think that something might happen there. Like it feels like they've been kind of stuck in second gear for a while, and there's been smoke swirling around that for a couple of seasons now. But beyond that, I mean, there's been changes there recently, right? I don't think Colorado would make any sense to get rid of Tad Boyle, given the success that he's had recent years. Oklahoma State just changed. I think the other interesting one would be Cincinnati and what kind of happens there, right? Like that's a Cincinnati basketball program that has a level of pride and level of pedigree that expects being able to get to the dance at a certain point in 4 straight years without really getting all that close. I don't know if that's something that Cincinnati fans are going to be all that thrilled about.
Jerome Tang bloom off his rose?
Oh man. I still think that Tang is a hell of a coach. Yep. I think the last couple of years he's had a wake-up call that he might have caught lightning in a bottle a little bit with the way that the roster was built the year that they had Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, right? He's tried to replicate that. He's tried to completely rebuild things in one spring and one summer, and that's a risky way to live. So they got money, they got support, they got backing. I just think they got to make better decisions on who they bring in and maybe try to maximize the idea of developing a level of culture there and a level of continuity. Because I think if you look at the teams that win at the highest level in the sport right now, there's continuity at Auburn. There was continuity at UConn the last couple of years, right? There's always continuity at Houston. And I think you have to be able to use the portal to plug gaps as needed, but find a way to be able to get a championship caliber core and build around that core and keep guys there for more than a year.
What's more pressure, trying to figure out who's going to be in the Final Four or dealing with all of what you do with your children and the bus and events and coaching or watching them and
getting them off the bus, man? I got a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, well, almost a 6-year-old, man, and getting them off the bus and refocused and getting homework done and getting them dressed and getting them ready. Like tonight we have our championship, the 9U basketball game. We have a baseball workout and we have a gymnastics class, and we got to get all of these kids fed. We got to get them changed. We got to get them to get their homework done and get them out the door in like the span of an hour and a half. It just, it's hard, man, because I don't know if you know this about kids, but 9-year-olds, they don't really want to listen to what their parents got to tell them.
No, they don't. Hey, I've been there. Rob, thank you, buddy. Great stuff as always. Rob Dauster, Field of 68 with me. David Smoke on 365 Sports.